Hey y'all, what's up? It's Sonita back with another video. Welcome back to my channel. It's like a lot of energy, but it's been a while, so I might be overdoing it. I'm definitely not as used to filming, so if I'm acting a little bit weird, that's why. Forgive me. I get lots of questions in my email about writing. Lots of messages, lots of comments, lots of DMs. I want to add to the conversation about how to write really strong personal statements. This isn't necessarily about Fulbright or graduate school. It can be about any type of application that you're applying to that's asking you to write a personal statement. As y'all may know, I am a Fulbright grant winner. I've also helped dozens of people win fellowships of all kinds, from the Fulbright to the Killiam to the Schwartzman. Also help people get into graduate school, also help people win scholarships. So I've read a lot. I've been around the block, as they say, when it comes to reading stuff. And I've learned a few things. The sun decided to come out as I was starting to talk. Interesting concept. So let's get into the video though. I want to give y'all some top tips and tricks to help write a really good, cohesive personal statement. So if you're struggling and you know that your statement is a little bit off, is feeling a little bit drab, and you want to find some ways to really strengthen it and make it competitive, I'm gonna do that for you right now in this video. It's going to be a bit truncated because there's hundreds of tips. There's hundreds of different methods and ways to write something really strong. There is no one person who's the arbiter of how to do this. And that's something I really want to reinforce because expertise is multifaceted. I'm absolutely an expert in this area, and there are other people who are experts and they'll offer you different advice. But y'all come to my channel because, it's just special. It's a special expertise. First tip, you want to be really clear about creating a thesis and a theme of this narrative of who you are. That means that if the question is like, tell us about yourself and why you're motivated to pursue this degree, pursue this scholarship, win this fellowship, etc. That is like a blank page. There's a million things that you can write. I don't care if you're 16 or if you're 26, you have experiences that have shaped you. You've probably gone through trauma. You've definitely faced some difficult challenge in your life. So no matter what, there's things that you can draw from. I do think that only focusing in on the most traumatic, life-changing events that have happened to you in the past miss an opportunity to talk about other aspects of your journey and creating a narrative and a theme. So what I mean by that is every single essay has some basic components of structure and framework that you should be following. There should be a clear beginning, middle, and ending. Everyone doesn't do this. Sometimes people are really creative and they hit it out of the park and they do their own thing and maybe they write a poem or whatever. But most of the time, you can go the straight and narrow path and choose to be really, really clear. So for example, if you want to talk about being an immigrant, just for example, if you want to talk about being an immigrant and how that has made you interested in understanding the law and immigration and protecting people and their families from deportation, for example, you might want to draw upon the fact that being an immigrant made you more interested and empathic to the challenges that immigrants face once they arrive in the United States. And that can look like a lot of different things. A very clear beginning or introduction to your personal narrative and who you are, and your theme, which is being someone who was an outsider, but choosing to continue to move forward despite that. You could begin by talking about a really interesting or funny anecdote. That could be something as simple as discussing the first time you tried some American food that you had never tried before, the first time that you had some sort of cultural tradition or heritage, firsts are really interesting. There's a lot that you can do with firsts because firsts rely upon vulnerability. They rely upon you not knowing exactly what's going on, or the unexpected can arise the first time that you do something. Oh my gosh, y'all, the sun is like, Another way that you can approach it is by talking about something that's really cherished and valued to you. So that can be a custom that you brought with you. Obviously, when you are an immigrant, you're a human being, you have an identity. There are always things that you're going to bring with you on your path, but you can talk about how that was something that brought you comfort during a time of duress or stress, etc. So my recommendation is beginning with an interesting and richly detailed narrative about something that has had a significant impact on you in your life. And of course, you can always do something funny too. It doesn't always have to be a really hard, traumatic, pivotal moment in your life. It can be something that's lighthearted and funny, that expresses your personality, that shows your sense of humor as well. That works too. And I do think humor is actually underused. Studies do show that trauma and talking about the really difficult things that have happened to you in your life can feel more compelling to people. But after having read hundreds of essays, and when I say hundreds, I mean hundreds of essays, I'm much more drawn to something that feels provocative in a different way rather than sympathy, if you know what I mean. I just think that whatever, I'm not even gonna get into this, y'all. I'm gonna stay off the soapbox today and just say I encourage you to consider very thoughtfully what are some moments in my life that had an impact on where I am today. That can be the first time you did something. That can be a huge success, a huge failure, something that surprised you, a new connection, a new relationship. So you want to anchor your essay and your narrative in an event that happened to you that has continued to be emblematic of the path that you have taken on your life, right? So for example, here's something else. If you want your theme to be, I was always a quitter and then something changed and I decided to be somebody who stuck through it, right? Your opening narrative can be about choosing to quit something or choosing to leave something, and then ending that paragraph discussing how now you're someone who doesn't just quit things, you also begin things and you see them through, and this opportunity is going to be the next thing that you want to see through in your life. Endless opportunities, endless ways to do this, but ground yourself in a narrative, in a theme of your life, of who you are that has shaped you, and start there. So don't do a grab bag of events that have been important to you. They should be connected to one another. And I know that I underscore this over and over and over and over in all the videos that I do. There should be a connective thread. There should be something that's seamlessly combining all of these different events together. And that's true because that's the hallmark of any good narrative. Everything feels really important. Nothing feels like you are just throwing something in there for the sake of doing it. And that does happen too, because sometimes, you just don't want to write anymore and you just start writing. And that's fine. That's like draft one, but you don't want that to be your final draft. So if you are there in the process, don't worry about that. Keep going, but start thinking about what are those really interesting moments that have signified something in my life or changed my path or make sense when I talk about where I am today. So that's my first tip. The second tip is the most compelling films, books, podcasts, whatever, stories, narratives, right? They represent a process of change. There's something by Joseph Campbell, it's a book called The Hero's Journey, and people who learn screenwriting often are taught that there should be a journey that the protagonist goes on. And Pixar films are amazing for this. Pixar films always begin with a character who's really struggling with something at the beginning, and by the end, we see that they've changed. And it doesn't mean that they're perfect and they no longer have any issues, but something about them over the course of the adventure that they go on has fundamentally shifted. Life isn't always that way, Life isn't always this Pixar film where you had a stutter and then you went through speech therapy and you practiced really hard and now you never study. It doesn't stutter. That isn't always the case for everyone. Sometimes it's, I had a really bad stutter and I couldn't even speak in class, and now I can speak in class, right? Now I have the confidence to apply for this fellowship or for graduate school where I know that I'm going to need to publicly speak because of everything that I went through to get here. But regardless of what your change is, so for example, it's so funny, I actually don't remember what I put in my essays when I was applying to grad school. I really wish I could remember, and it's so, but it was a long time ago, okay? That was like 7 years ago. So I can't, but for example, if I was going to write something today, perhaps I might talk about the fact that I'm a twin and my sister and I are identical. And so growing up, a big part of who I was trying to figure out my own identity and still remain close to my sister. And so where I am today in my life would really be a representation of trying to balance that challenge. And so that represents this process of change if I am clear about discussing how that became an issue for me or when I became aware of that, and failing, trying something new, what I did to change my own life. And that's really key in this. We all make decisions. We all have agency. Some people have a lot of agency, right? It feels like they can do whatever they want because they have unlimited resources, money, time, power, celebrity, whatever. But even you and I, ordinary people, we have agency. We are constrained by a lot of things. Let me stay off my I'm staying off my soapbox. But we are constrained, and yet we still can make choices for ourselves. And so think about, with this process of change or this narrative arc or the hero's journey, as it were, what choices did you make that changed your life, right? Or continued to augment your journey from that first step, which is anchoring yourself in a narrative or in an anecdote, a history, a moment, or whatever. Think about how your decisions, the decisions that you've made, and sometimes those decisions are made for us, how they have propelled us forward on this journey. Okay, so what that could be is often as it is when we're thinking about these academic fellowships or scholarships or applying to grad school or whatever, think about the decisions that you made and the decisions that you made that ended up moving you forward toward a specific goal. So as it happens when we're doing academic applications, it tends to be, I decided to join a club, I worked really hard to get an A, I went out on a limb and pushed myself to take more classes in XYZ, I changed my major, I won an award, right? It tends to cohere around that kind of stuff. And that's fine. But, for the personal statement, if you want it to be this intimate journey of change where it's psychological or it's relational, that's totally fine too, because personal statements really want to know more about who you are as a human being, not just the things that you've accomplished. So when it comes to a process of change, it might not feel quite so evident. And sometimes you don't have to do it, right? So for example, I can tell you very clearly what my personal statement for Fulbright discussed. I talked about the first time that I lived in France and studying abroad and meeting other Black people who were living in Aix-en-Provence, which is where I studied, and people asking me where I was from, and me saying the United States, and people saying, no, where are you really from? And then me having to explain the history of the transatlantic slave trade and how connecting with people who were African made me more curious about race and ethnicity globally, right? So that's the narrative that I use. So then I continue to talk about how I push myself to continue studying race and ethnicity in different contexts. So understanding how it worked in the educational context when I did AmeriCorps, examining how it worked in alternative food sites when I did my master's thesis. So there's always space to be more curious and draw more connections between things that seem disparate. There's always that possibility. And I do think, having read so many of these essays, one missed opportunity is trying to make the story as predictable and sanitized as possible. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you should write these traumatic, tragic stories. I'm not saying that. I've read things, I've literally read essays where people are talking about casually sexual abuse, where people are glossing over wanting to kill people. I'm not joking. I wish I was. When it comes to doing this, you want to be incredibly thoughtful and introspective and open up a little bit more so that we get inside of your psychology a little bit. Writing something that feels super manufactured and robotic and like, yes, and I am going to be an incredible person because I know all of these facts and I've done all these things and I won all these awards is fine, but where's your individuality in that? When you were going through something or going through a change, or what happened to you? Tell us a little bit more. Tell us a little bit more about why you care. Why did this matter to you? What did you really hope to accomplish? And make it a touch personal so that we can separate you from the hundreds of other people who are competing with you potentially for the exact same opportunity. Don't let us forget you, but you don't need to stand out by being the person who has suffered the most. And I say that with respect, because some people have been through horrific things, and yet you don't need that horrific thing to make you interesting. The last tip that I have is write vividly, write with rich description. Avoid using the same cliched stuff that we see over and over and over again. You know, I literally could create a predictor of the kinds of text that I see in these essays. And that is because I don't feel that there's enough emphasis given on how to write in your own voice and avoid trying to sound like everybody else. So it's not your fault. You know, this isn't to blame you. I've been there before. Again, draft one, it's cool. I get it. Don't worry. You know, you're gonna keep going. You're going to continue to improve with every subsequent draft. So be rich and vivid in description. I always tell people, draw upon the five senses whenever you can. So if you're giving us a narrative and an anecdote, what did you see? What did it smell like? What did you hear? You sometimes can't fit all of that in your description, but that can help to liven up writing that feels a little bit baseline, you know, to make it pop a little bit and be more enticing and compelling to the reader. So for example, if you're talking about, you know, the first time that you ever lived abroad and it was so incredible and people were so interesting and you felt at home, why? Give us a sense of, put us there with you. You know, we want to feel that too. And you can do that by providing more detail and avoiding the cliches that you might read otherwise. Another thing that I really highly recommend is reading really good writing. Reading really good writing can be intimidating. You can be like, oh my God, my writing is trash. I'll never be like that. I'll never be that good. There's no point, like I'm gonna wrap it up. I'm gonna actually just get back on TikTok or whatever you're doing. Get back on Netflix, open a book, whatever. Work out for people who like to work out, fine, whatever. I get that, but it can also be so inspiring. I mean, every time I read an incredible piece of writing, it makes me want to continue to write because I also really struggle with thinking my own writing feels cliche, boring, isn't interesting, doesn't add anything, but it can also be amazing. Here's 3 pieces that I would recommend if you're like, what are you talking about? Good writing, I don't like reading, or I don't read articles. Like, I'm a big reader. I love to read. I do read at least one long form article per day. I don't read as many books as I would like to, but I've gotten back into reading usually every night or every other night. And so here's 3 articles that I would recommend for people who also don't feel like they have time to crack open a book. So the first piece is written by Ryan Coogler. It's some sort of a eulogy that he wrote after the tragic passing of Chadwick Boseman. He is an incredible writer. He uses very vivid descriptions. He is a complete individual. You don't feel like he's trying to copy anyone, and his emotions come through on the page. It's a very emotional piece. The next piece that I recommend reading is by Rachel Cudzie-Ganza. I actually think you should read anything she's written. She's so dope. She's so incredible. She had a book, and I don't know why they keep pushing this book back because I really want to read it, but she writes essays for all kinds of places. I think she's also a professor. But Rachel Cudzie-Ganza wrote an incredible piece on Dylan Roof, who is the white supremacist who murdered those people at the Emmanuel AME Baptist Church, including killing a state senator. So she wrote a piece for GQ entitled A Most American Terrorist. I recommend it to everyone, not just because it's socio-political and it's personal, it's biographical, autobiographical and autoethnographic as well, but just because she's such a good writer. The way that she puts together sentences and ideas feels totally unique, and you will walk away from that piece changed. At least I was. So I do recommend checking out Rachel Cudzie-Ganza. The last piece I would recommend is actually a John Boyega interview. It was released during the Black Lives Matter racial uprisings, and John Boyega gets really personal. He's saying things that he's never said before. He's taking different stances, but I really like the journalist's approach of making it really fascinating and quirky. And so these are 3 different examples of the kinds of public writings that are out there for you to devour and to learn from and to think about. So my last tip is reading other pieces of writing that feel really personal and don't have this very detached, typical journalistic style or even academic style that we've grown too used to, which is why we need to read more novels and more creative pieces and listen to podcasts and stuff like that. Thank y'all so much for watching. Please leave a comment down below if any of this has helped you, or if there's any tips that are really crucial for you in your writing that have helped you for personal statements or anything else like that. Be well and take care of yourselves. And of course, peace. Of course the sun comes out. Why the hell is the sun coming out? You know what I'm saying? Now I'm like fighting the sun. Why? Okay. Hey guys, Happy New Year. Welcome back to my channel. No, I'm just kidding. Hold on, my nose itches. What's going on? So, you know what though? That's fine. Oh Lord, the shadows on my face. Oh God. My nose itches. I encourage you to think thoughtfully. Think thoughtfully